Hello and welcome back to Novels with Nora. Today I'm here in my cozy chair because we are just gonna have like a little chatty sit down video today. So as you may or may not know, I am currently in grad school to get my master's of library and information science to eventually go on and become a teen librarian. So I am starting a new little series here on my channel called Becoming a Librarian, and I think it would just be fun to walk through all the steps that it took to get where I am and where I eventually want to be. So this will really just be a way for me to document the whole process of becoming a librarian fully, and also it's kind of an elusive career path because if you don't know exactly how to take each step, it can be kind of confusing, especially because when I was trying to choose like what to do in college and where to go, I had no clue what I was doing because, as you'll see, there's a lot of different choices open to you when you want to become a librarian. So this is just a way for me to help get some information out there if you're also interested, and also just to document my path to my dream career. So this is Becoming a Librarian episode 1, where I will be talking about getting a job in a library as like my very first job in high school, and then going to college, and then getting into grad school. So kind of a lot of things, but they all tie into each other. So let's just get started. First, we're going to start all the way back in high school. I had no clue what I wanted to do. I bounced all around through so many different ideas for a long time. I was really into criminal minds in high school and still am, but like was really into it in high school. And so for a time I thought I wanted to be like a forensic psychologist or like be a profiler or like do something with the FBI. And then I realized maybe that's not quite for me. The police force and all that, not really my thing. And then I just bounced around for like a whole bunch of different ideas, eventually landing on ornithology, which is like the study of birds. And because we have a bird feeder in our backyard and I absolutely love looking at the birds. I was like, oh, that'll be perfect, like something that I really love doing. There's not a whole lot of program options. And when I wanted to do that, my goal was to go to Cornell, which, you know, not unattainable, but definitely like a reach. And I realized it was very science heavy, and like I enjoy science, but it's not like my forte, you know? So I was like, maybe not that. So I really was I had no clue. I was going on so many college visits and I had no clue where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. So it was just all very confusing. And then in my junior year of high school, I got a job as a page at my public library. And if you're unfamiliar with the library system, the page is the like lowest position you can have in a library. They're typically the people who, when you return books, they put them back on the shelves, they sort them to make sure that they're going in the right area, and then they put them back on the shelves. In some library systems, they also are the ones who pull holds. So like when you send it to hold, they're the ones who go and get them off the shelf. That's not how it was in my library. We were exclusively just returning things to the shelves, and then occasionally mostly shelf reading, which is just like making sure that all the books in a certain section are in order. And I started this job during COVID, so we did a lot of shelf reading because we were not open to the public, so patrons weren't coming in, so we weren't getting a whole lot of things checked out. So it was a lot of shelf reading, but I realized through that process, I'd always loved reading. Let me make that very clear. I loved it so much. Like it was always my biggest hobby. I loved the library. I would go as a patron all the time. And then I finally got a position there and was like, this is fantastic. Like I'm getting paid to be in the library. Like this is so fantastic. I also loved all of my coworkers. Like I had not a single problem with any one of them. I loved them all so much. And I just loved going into work, which I think is not super common, especially for like your first job in high school, to love it so incredibly much, but I really did. And I realized looking around at all of like the actual librarians who were there, I was like, this could be my job. I don't know why I hadn't thought of this sooner. Truly, I really don't know why it didn't hit me sooner that I could be a librarian. But then I realized, oh my God, duh, this is exactly what I should be doing. So then my next step from there was, okay, so how do I become a librarian? So I talked to the librarians in the library and I just talked to them like, where did you go to school? What did you study? What was your major? And I got a lot of mixed responses. Most people stayed in Ohio unless they were from other states and then they did it there. But the overwhelming response I got was, you can kind of major in anything. Like just pick a topic that interests you and then do that, because grad schools for library science like to see that you have like a diverse background. So some of the librarians I talked to, like one of them was a subject librarian in history, so he had like a history major behind him, and then just a lot of English degrees, which completely makes sense and was my first thought. But when I was looking for schools, I knew that I did not want to be an English major. And no hate to English majors, they're some of the coolest people, but I just didn't want to have to do reading as an assignment. Like you read in college no matter what your major is, but I didn't want to have to like read and dissect and like not be reading for pleasure as much. yeah, not for me. I don't really like reading classics. So I have a lot of mixed thoughts about this, but I just knew I did not want to be an English major. I didn't think that was for me. And so I knew I didn't want to do that. But then I was like, okay, well, what do I do? So I toured 7, I think, different schools and didn't really love any of them. Background being that in the state I live in, Ohio, there is only one school that offers the master program that I needed for library science, and that school is Kent State. And I toured there and I didn't like it. I knew that I did not want to live there. I did not want to spend 4 years of my life there. So I was like, okay, that's kind of a problem because now I don't know where to go. So I toured so many different schools, truly. I think it was like 7. Like my mom took like weeks off of work so she could just take me on all these tours. And it was a lot of fun. I will be honest with you, touring schools was so much fun, but I just never really found anything that I liked until I ended up at the University of Toledo. I just fell in love with the campus and they had so many different major options, which is one of the things I was really looking at, was to make sure that the school I picked would have options. Knowing that I didn't know what I wanted to major in, having options was super important to me. So they had so many different options and I fell in love with the campus. So that's where I ended up going. And I did go in undecided. I hadn't picked a major. My major was undecided. And so they put you in a lot of like career exploration courses where you just kind of figure out what you think you might do. You do a lot of work with like career services and like they talk about like the different jobs you can have and like help with like resume building. And honestly, the classes I took for that were like incredibly beneficial. I really enjoyed them. And because I knew I wanted to be a librarian, it was mostly not for me career exploration so much as major exploration. So I just took like all of my like intro classes, all of like my core courses, and I ended up taking Introduction to Women and Gender Studies, or Introduction to, we just called it intro, so I don't really know what it was, but it was an intro course in Women and Gender Studies. And I really loved the professor. I really loved how it was a discussion-based class and we were talking about things that I really cared about, but never really had a way to talk about before or anyone to talk about them with. So I absolutely loved that course. And then the professor came up to me one day and she was like, Nora, I think that you would be a really good major. Have you considered that? And I was like, you know what? I kind of had considered that because I don't have a major currently and I need one. So I think this would be really good. So I met with the chair of the department and she was honestly really intimidating at first, but she just cares about the department so much and I could really tell. And she also really cares about the students. And so I declared my major as Women's and Gender Studies and it is the best decision I've ever made for myself. Truly, I love that department so much and it is one of the main things I miss about college. I am so happy with the major that I picked and the path it ended up taking me on. It was just like kismet, truly. Like it felt planned and like predestined by the universe for me to end up there, which sounds crazy, but I had no clue what I was doing. And then I took that class and everything worked out perfectly for me. And through Women's and Gender Studies, I found my voice and I found myself and really grew into like the young feminist that I am now. And truly, I say truly a lot, but I cannot thank that department enough for everything, all the skills, the experiences that it's given me. I have not enough good things to say. I loved it so much. But also while I was in school, I needed a job. And I think that's something that a lot of college students can relate to. But I still don't have my license and I didn't have a car, obviously, on campus. So I was like, okay, so I want an on-campus job. So I interviewed several places. Nothing really felt right though, until I saw a job opening at the library on campus. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. Like, I want to be a librarian. I've worked in the library before. Perfect. So I went in for an interview and had truly a great time. Like it was the best job interview I've ever had. I was like laughing and chatting with them and just, it felt like a conversation and not so much like an interview, which I think are the best interviews. And I ended up getting the job. So I became a circulation student assistant at the on-campus library. And I loved that job so much. Again, I loved going to work every day in a library and I loved all the people that I worked with and how much they loved libraries and how much they loved reading. It was so wonderful. And also, working at the on-campus library, we would go in and we would always help people who come up to the desk because that's the main thing. If they needed a book, we'd find it for them. We'd help them like call holds in, things like that. But you'd get to do your homework at the desk. And that was so fantastic because college, you have a lot of homework and being able to do your homework and get paid for it at the same time, really wonderful. But I loved that job and it opened my eyes to a new set of possibilities in library science because working in a public library and working in an academic library are very different. And it made me like very solidly confirmed that I wanted to work in a public library, which is very fantastic. Because what I want to do in libraries, I realized I want to work with people. I want to work with fiction books and I want to help people like find a love of reading. And not that you can't do that in an academic library, but it's just harder because most of the books they have are nonfiction and like textbooks. And so if that's something you're interested in and you're more on like the information side, then academic libraries all the way. That's perfect for you. But I realized that that definitely wasn't for me and I was right in my conviction for public libraries. So flashing forward a little bit, one of the final classes I took for my major was a pro seminar. And through this, we had to do what was called a feminist visibility project, where we had to do something on campus to make feminism visible. And the project that and we could choose literally anything we wanted to do. And I chose to do a display in the library of feminist fiction. One, to show that you can read feminist literature and it doesn't have to be like textbooks or nonfiction or like classics. You can read like every day. Like one of the books I put on there was like the first Percy Jackson book, because Annabeth Chase is a feminist character and you might not see her that way, but she is. And so I did a display like that, and also again showed me a new side of libraries, where like pulling the books from my collection and having to change their designation in our system to make sure that they would stay on display and not like up on the floor where they were. Just a lot of new things that I got to see, and it was just so rewarding getting to sit at the desk and see people getting excited about my display and checking the books out. And it was just so wonderful and really confirmed to me that yes, this is what I want to be doing, even more than I already had. So I loved that so much. And then on top of that, which was incredible on its own, women's and gender studies really pushes you for research, which I don't think you would. I didn't think about that beforehand, but I did so much research, and I was also able to present in a research showcase on campus. And those things look really fantastic on a resume, especially going into library science is my chosen field. Getting to say I've worked in both a public and an academic library, I've done research, I've presented research, and I've done a library display already. All of those things really bulked up my resume so much. And had I done any other major, I would not have had any of those experiences. I might have done some research, but I can't say for sure if that would have been the case. And I definitely would not have been able to do a display in the library. So my major truly, this is me telling you that you should become a women's and gender studies major. Also, it really helps in a library setting because libraries are public places. They are some of the last like third spaces that we have left. And so you never know who's going to walk through your doors. And women's and gender studies really prepares you to deal with diverse populations. And like you can have a conversation with anyone and connect with them on anything because of the background that I have. I love my degree. Truly, if I could go back and do anything different, I wouldn't, because I love the path that I ended up on, and I loved all my professors, and I'm still in contact with them today. And like they're some of my biggest like mentors and champions. Truly, women's and gender studies for the win. But anyway, it also just helped me bulk up my resume, and the professors and the chair of the department, they want to see their students succeed. So they were doing like anything for them, reaching out to any of their contacts, just helping in any way that they can. And it was just such a wonderful experience for me. But all of those things helped to pad out my resume. So when it came time for applying to grad school, I felt very confident in my ability to get in. Because when I was applying for just like my undergrad, I was so nervous that I wasn't going to get in. I had no need to be nervous. The University of Toledo is not a super competitive school, but I was still very nervous. Applying for grad school, I was like, no, I'm going to get in. It's just a matter of where do I want to go. And that was so freeing in a way, knowing that my resume was just so solid. And it's like, I think if you want to go into library science, obviously, if you make that decision while you're still in undergrad, there's still things you can do. You can try and get a job on your on-campus library, you can do research, you can just show your love of libraries. But I will say, working in a library in high school, I think also just really helped because it shows a dedication across time. But when it came time to applying, I knew that my options were going to be slightly limited because, again, living in Ohio, there was only one school that even offers the program, and it's a fully online program. So talking to all of my advisors, they were like, we understand that that's the case, and it's also the cheapest program. However, in-person grad school experience are like no other. And they just constantly were telling me how great their grad school experiences were and how much they loved their classes and like their small classes and how it was just such a wonderful experience for them. And I'm like, I would love to do an in-person thing, but that means I'd have to move out of state. And because I want, also, side note, Ohio is one of the highest paying states for librarians, so I wanted to stay here. And also, I love the community and the library that I worked in high school, and I could see myself working there like long term. And then there's also the Cleveland Public Library system is just like one of the best library systems in my opinion, which is a little bit biased, but I love our library system, and I knew that I could see myself staying here. Especially, I just love where I live. I love the community that I have here, and so I know I wanted to stay here. So the idea of going out of state was very daunting for so many reasons, financially, emotionally, just everything. So I applied to two schools. I applied to Kent State, and then I applied to the University of Pittsburgh, because when I was looking for schools to apply to, it was how expensive is it, how far away is it, and do they have the concentration I want? Because Library science has so many different concentrations. You can go into museum studies, you can go into archival studies. There's public libraries, there's academic libraries. You could just go on like the user interface side, the like metadata side. There's so many things that you can do, and you don't have to pick a concentration right away. So if you want to just go in and then figure it out from there, of course, that's obviously an option. But I knew I wanted to be a teen librarian because I want to work with youth. I read mostly YA books. I want to help inspire a love of reading in teens the same way that librarians helped in me. So when I was looking for a school to apply to, I was making sure that I was looking for schools that had a youth librarianship concentration. And University of Pittsburgh is one of like the best schools for youth librarianship. However, it is like 2 or 3 times more expensive than Kent. So I applied and I did get in, but I inevitably chose to just stick with Kent, especially because even just the University of Pittsburgh's online program is still twice as expensive as Kent's. And if I was going to be living at home anyway and doing it online, I didn't see the value in spending that much more money for still an online program. So I ended up going with Kent, and Kent State, they waived their application fee for a certain amount of time, and that was fantastic because application fees, like, you sometimes don't factor that into the cost of schools, but it's so expensive. Kent's was $50, and I got that waived, which was fantastic, but for Pittsburgh, it was $80 just to apply to the school, and then you have to pay to send in your transcript. So it's a very expensive process, which is incredibly unfortunate, but this was my dream, and so I was going to chase it no matter what. So that kind of brings us to where we are now. I'm in my first semester of library science school at Kent State. Everyone just refers to it as library school, so it's so fantastic. I am loving the classes I'm in. It's typically about a 2-year program, but you can take longer or shorter just depending on, how many classes you're taking. But that kind of brings us to where we are now. And I do not currently have a job, but mainly because I can't drive, so I can't get myself anywhere, but I will be looking for a job in a library, so I can be working in a library while also doing library school. But yeah, so clearly becoming a librarian, there's a lot of choices that you have to make in the process because it's not like, well, I want to be an engineer, so you go to school for engineering. So it's scary in that way because you have so many choices, and choices are very overwhelming, especially when they're like career and life defining choices. And also just when people ask like, oh, what are you in school for? I'll be like, oh, like women's and gender studies. I thought you wanted to be a librarian. Oh, no, I'm going to be. It just takes a few steps to get there first. So, and also unfortunately grad school is okay, so here's another thing. Grad school is like a master's degree is required to become an official librarian in the state of Ohio. You can work in libraries and have a different position title like library associate, or like you can work in circulation or be a page or like any of those other things. But to be a full certified librarian, you have to have your master's degree. So that's how it works here in Ohio for sure. And I think a lot of other states are similar, but you might have to check in your state because it is different in some states. That's why I'm in grad school, and I am loving it. It is library and information science because they really do go together. And I'm not loving the information science stuff so much, which is again why I didn't want to work in an academic library, because they really deal with the information science side of it so heavily. And not so much in public libraries, like definitely a little bit, but not nearly as heavily as in academic libraries. So that's kind of the story of how I ended up chasing my dreams to becoming a librarian. And this is just part 1 because there's a lot of steps that are going to be taken in between. So I hope that this was informational for someone, and even if you just have questions about me and where I went to school and how I ended up here, I hope this answered some of your questions, and I hope that you now know a little bit more about librarianship and library science. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any further questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll get back to you. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find you the answer, because that is one of my jobs as a future librarian, is to help you find information. So yeah, leave a comment, like this video, and subscribe, and I will see you again later. Bye!